Yo, what's happening, guys? This is a video about one way to put together a compound of exercises to make for a complete workout that works at a very high level. This is only one way to do it, but this is one of my favorite ways to do it. Check out this set right here. This is the set that I'm going to be talking about. And if you're not interested in the exercises, get a couple cameos by my dog, and that might make up for the boringness of these sets. Check it out. Okay guys, so what you're seeing is a chest workout. This literally was the only thing that I did for chest outside of maybe a couple warm-up sets to wire in these exercises. Let's break them down a little bit before we talk about why these combinations of 4 exercises plus 1 isometric at the end makes for a really smart and strategic workout. You don't have to have all this equipment, I promise you that. You just have to have the same mental approach. So what you're seeing is we started with a decline cable fly. From there, we went to an incline dumbbell fly with 1 1/4 repetitions. From there, we went to a machine incline press. This can be any press for all you guys out there. And then we went to a floor press. Following that floor press, we did an isometric stretch for the chest. Some people call it a doorway stretch. So let's talk about why this combination is excellent. Again, this isn't the only way to do things. I'm not biased to this saying this is the only thing you possibly could do. This is, I am the best at everything when it comes to putting together combinations. However, my goal for all of you guys is that you're not putting together just a mixing and matching, in this example, of chest exercises and hoping that they work. The purpose of making combination exercises most of the time is that you're trying to do probably 1 or 2 things. Make a complete set that gets a muscle through its entire contractile range, which this does, but it's not the ultimate goal. Or number 2, okay, or B, or whatever I said previously, you're trying to give this like metabolic pump style effect, which has its benefits. I'm not talking about that right now, but it's not bad. It's a good thing to include in your training, specifically in my opinion for circulation and recovery. 2 awesome things that you're gonna want to implement in your training often. What is the purpose of this set? Why did I put it in this order? Number 1, I'm trying to get my chest, as I previously mentioned, through the majority of its contractile range. Pretty much from here all the way to here, maybe somewhat in here, okay? Fully stretched, almost all the way contracted, kind of fully contracted. All that is being, implemented by how far my humerus is moving through space. Most of you guys out there watching this probably know that the chest works by contracting the humerus in toward the body in some way, shape, or form to some degree of range of motion up or down into the ribs, whatever, that doesn't matter. Why for the exercise order? What I'm doing in this combination of sets is I'm going from the exercise that's going to require the most demand to coordinate to the exercise that's going to create the least demand to coordinate. So neurologically complex, a lot of moving parts happening at the same time, and I'll explain why. We started with the decline fly. You notice there's no stability to that. It's just me and the cable. So I have to coordinate stabilizing this cable, pulling me back. In addition to that, a fly is more complex than a press because instead of this lever length, you have this lever length. There's a lot more for your brain to compute, especially when fatigue starts to set in. That's why we started with the open decline fly. From there, we went to an incline fly. Now, I made it 1 1/4 because, again, I'm thinking a little bit about the loading pattern. I know that the bottom of this exercise is the hardest. I'm not wanting to do a bajillion repetitions, so instead of doing a bajillion repetitions with a lighter load, I actually chose a little heavier load and just spent more time where it was going to be challenging, AKA the bottom of that repetition. But again, we went from a fly to another fly. The only difference now is it's not as much of a demand of coordination because I have a bench to give me a little bit of stability. Is it a different degree of maybe isolating or working the chest? Yeah, sure, but that's not the purpose here, okay? So we have basically 2 exercises in a row that are pretty neurologically complex, just for simplicity's sake, okay? And went across the gym to an incline press. Now, we have the luxury of having a prime incline press, so I was able to do two things here. Number one, I was able to simplify the exercise by, instead of having a lever length here, I have a lever length here, which is a lot easier for my brain to compute because I'm starting to fatigue at this point. I'm getting closer and closer to failure. On the previous two exercises, I did not fail. This one, I'm really on the brink of that, as you should have seen in the video. The second point is, you'll notice where the weights are. They're at the bottom of this 3-peg loading option, okay? The reason why is because at the top of the press, I'm trying to actually make that feel like it's the heaviest. And the reason why is because I had two exercises previous to that were actually hardest in this stretch. So I'm getting pretty fatigued in this range of motion, but I still got a little bit of juice left in this top range, okay? If you don't have the opportunity to do that, realize you're still getting plenty of benefit if you find a machine press that has fixed handles, which means they don't move. Because you can create, especially at the top of that press, this inward intent of pulling this humerus across the pecs in toward the sternum. And that's gonna add a little bit of intensity to those contractions. But basically, to simplify it, my approach in the first two exercises, the flies, was to make the stretch as hard as possible, make the lengthening part of the chest as hard as possible. Now my emphasis in the last two exercises, starting with the incline press, is actually to make contraction my biggest form of focus, okay? So from there, we went into a floor Smith press. Couple reasons. The Smith press, it works in a straight line, okay? And I would suggest if you're gonna use the Smith machine, use one that works in a straight line. A barbell or a dumbbell floor press will do just fine, but I have the luxury of a Smith machine. Again, that simplifies things. Now, why on the floor instead of a bench? Pretty simple. My chest is pretty fatigued here. My chest is starting to get pretty fatigued in that top. So I kind of want to just stay away from that fully stretched position. So instead of having a dumbbell that allows me to track this far, now the floor really only allows me to track this far. So I'm working kind of like a middle range for the pecs, which is a pretty safe way to train any muscle when it's super fatigued. So mind you, after I'm getting done with exercise 3, coming into exercise 4, the last one, I'm pretty smoked, okay? So my weight is very conservative that I'm using for load, and my range of motion needs to be the same. That's why we're working the middle of the range, still with an emphasis of really squeezing that humerus into the pec tissue to make that contraction very challenging. The other thing that you're noticing is that it wasn't just a straight set of repetitions like the other ones were. I actually had breaks in between these sets. I turned them into what we call clusters. And that's not to make things more fancy. That's because I want my efficiency of each contraction to stay very intense and very high. I don't want to get sloppy with my repetitions. I would like to finish with more repetitions than what I started with on the flies, but in order to do that with a load that's really going to tax me, I prefer to go into the cluster set. And that is 100% just something that I like to do. I think it works for most people if they carry it out right, okay? But it's not something that you have to do. You can just do a straight set of 15 to 20 reps, make it challenging, and you'll be just fine. I just prefer, to have more of a sprinter's approach than a long distance mentality. It just works better for me. Okay, so take a look at that. And then from there, after you see the cameo from the dog, she and I are going into what basically is a doorway stretch. So what I'm doing is I'm getting my arms as far into extension as I possibly can, okay? And then I'm also taking my pecs and rolling them out. And as I roll them out, I'm getting to this like externally rotated anatomical style position, which may look different for you, but for me, I just have more things to work around, okay? Because I'm so stinking big. Oh, such a bad joke, okay? Some things to work around, not great mobility in my shoulders, okay? But getting those pecs, if this is like my insertion, this is like my origin, I'm trying to get this as far stretched as I possibly can. And the way that I load the pecs there is if the bar's here, I'm just kind of leaning more and more forward over the course of I would recommend like a 30 to 60 second stretch. If you're really, sadistic towards yourself, maybe 2 minutes is the way you finish your workout. I don't know what I did, okay, what you guys are seeing is my third set, my last set, okay? So I did 3 rounds and that was my chest workout. I had no changes to load, no changes to repetition. By the time I get into that third round, I really was struggling to finish, and that's when I called it quits, okay? What I'm trying to stay away from is damaging tissue too much. I just want the metabolic effect to happen. So as massive of a pump as I can get, and as soon as performance starts to drop off, that's when I call it quits. That was the goal of the workout, okay? So what I might suggest to you guys is sometimes it can be counterproductive to add in that isometric every single set. It might have your brain telling your body to relax, calm down, shut down, and stop working. So you may want to, like I did, save that isometric stretch until your very last set, and then when that's done, call it quits for pecs, okay? So this, just to recap, is one way to put a combination of exercises together. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5. It's really what you want it to be, but don't just make a hodgepodge of exercises. Have some very definitive goals as to what the set is accomplishing, because you need performance, efficiency, and intensity always to stay at its highest potential possible. Otherwise, it's just unwanted, unnecessary, middle of the road volume that's not going to create any kind of adaptation that you want. It's just going to make undue stress, so it's going to make your life a whole lot worse. And what I don't want to hear back is, I'm not having any progress, Bryce. Why is that? Well, if you stick to these standards, I think that you're going to be just fine. So go into the gym, try this out, give it 2 to 3 rounds, okay? Really challenge yourself, get uncomfortable, and let me know how it goes.